All right, I'd like to go over Chapter 2, hands-on. So really the rest of this time until we finish and we go through the whole entire chapter is basically a hands-on environment for us, right? Or an activity for us. So if you're not at a computer, please get to one. I think all of you are, so that's great. And if you'd like to follow along with me, you can start on page 27 of your book. So if you want to start there, because that's just really the beginning of the chapter. Okay. Now, there's a few things I'd like to do and have you do to get prepared for this chapter. So the first thing I'd like you to do is open up Notepad. Open up Notepad. Not Notepad++ or Dreamweaver or any of those tools, but just simple Notepad, or if you're using an Apple, of course, you can use TextEdit. Okay. The more basic the tool, the better. The more complex the tool, the more difficult, because we got to now worry about all these other options and buttons and colors that we don't want to, at least not yet. Okay. The next thing I'd like you to do is open up a couple of browsers. Right? I'd asked you, I think last week, that you should have at minimum 2. I would like more than 3, but at minimum you got to have 2 browsers that you can test with. So open up at least 2 browsers. I'm going to have 3 open. I'm going to have IE open, I'm going to have Chrome open, and then I'm going to have Firefox open. And then what I've done is I've decided to put the browsers on one side and the Notepad on the other. So this way I can code and then view what I'm coding next to each other, and I don't have to flip between windows, right? I just have them right next to each other, and I can view them both at the same time. So again, we're simply preparing our environment to start to code. Okay. In the Notepad, please code your basic code that we need. What you learned in Chapter 1. Go to it. So Michael, you're opening up your text editor, right? Text edit and a couple of browsers. And then in that text edit, you're coding the basic code that we need to get started. I might provide a recommendation for future hands-on in this class is that you create a template file for yourself. Right? An HTML file. Perfect. So perhaps that one might be useful for you. So every time we get into class and we're ready to do our hands-on, right, you have that file ready to go. And coding all of those elements, those 5, 6, 7 initial baseline elements, you don't need to do it every time. You simply just make a copy of the file and you're ready to go. Okay? So again, just a suggestion. I'll give you another minute or so to get that code typed all in. Alright, so here's the code that I'm looking for. Although on my screen it's really small, so I'm going to go ahead and change the format to change the display a bit, so this way it's a little bit easier for all of us to see. So I'm going to choose Arial because that's a pretty good font to use because it distinguishes the difference between I's, L's, and 1's. We can tell the difference between all of those pretty easily. Okay? Now, we don't have any information in the title yet, and we don't have any information in the body. So that's what I want from you. So there shouldn't be any information within the body element or within the title element. We're going to fill those in a little bit. Now, please save that file as index.html. Save it wherever you'd like. Again, this is simply an in-class, right, hands-on activity for us. If you'd like to save these files for later, go ahead. If not, it's okay. Now, please open that file in the browsers that you opened. If it looks like you didn't open anything, you probably did open something, but it's just blank. There's nothing in it yet, right? So you don't have any content. So if your browser is simply a white background, then you're good to go, most likely. Check the address bar at the top. It should say something like file and then some sort of path to the file. I'm sorry? Index.html. Yep. Okay. Yes. Nope. I want you to name an index to get comfortable, because that's really going to be your home page. Later on, when it asks you and we want to create other pages, like maybe a page for contact us, then we might call it contact us. But for now, I want you to get comfortable with that index in your head. This way, every page that's a home page or the first page of a website will be called index for us. Okay? Yeah. Later on, then you'll be able to decide what you want to call it. Okay? Yep. But just to confirm, home pages, right, are always called index.html. Okay, good. All right, now, just so we're all clear on what we're doing in the next few pages in this chapter, hands-on, is that I'm going through the book and through the sections in general. That is, I'm not going to follow the book exactly, right? So if you're trying to follow what I'm doing and you're trying to work ahead, well, then what you're doing may not be exactly what I'm going to be doing, right? I'm going to go through each section, but I may not be following exactly what the book has, because I like to maybe add something or change something, right? And make it unique for this classroom, okay? So I just wanted to let you know, so if you're following along and you're like, well, why aren't you doing the same thing that the book has? Well, it's because I purposely do that, right? So just as an FYI, okay? You can go through the book when you have a chance on your own, going through exactly the way it is. I may skip sections or refer to other areas of the chapter, but again, I just want to let you know that ahead of time, that we may not go through it exactly page by page. Just want to let you know that. Okay? All right, in this case, we are going to go to page 28, which happens to be the first page that has something on it, and we're going to do a little work here. So go to your notepad, and the first thing we want to do is add a title, of course. And the title that I want you to use is Hands-On Practice. As you can see, the sample practice, hands-on practice, does not use that title. It uses something different, right? So that's kind of the differences that I'm going to be doing. Great. All right, now we're going to start putting some stuff in the body, okay? So give me a new line in the body element, and then I want you to tab in, right, to give us a nice little structure, a visual structure to our code. And I want to type in the first heading level. So I'm going to type in our opening little wicket there, or less than symbol, H1. I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to put in a closing H1 element. So this is the first heading level. Okay? Now that I have both, I'm now going to fill in the content that goes in between. Right? So let's just go ahead and type in heading level 1. Now, the reason why I wrote both tags, the opening and the closing, first is because it's very common that, at least when we first start coding and developing web pages, we forget to close the element. So by writing in the opening and closing at the same time, right after each other, and then going back, it's much less, right, a chance that we have to forget to close that tag. Okay? All right. Let's now go to the next line. Go ahead and tab in, and now let's write in the next heading level. Oops. And so that's H2 is level 2. Now, just for kicks, I'd like to see what this so far looks like. So please save your index file. Since you already have a name, probably your keyboard shortcut will work fine. Control S is the keyboard shortcut for save. Now, go ahead and flip over to your browser. And now that you have the file already open, you can use a shortcut for that too. Either the keyboard by pressing F5, or use that little arrow that looks like it's going in a circle, right, on the address bar. Click on that and it will refresh the page. And so now, two things should have changed. One, the tab at the top of your browser should now be populated with something more appropriate. And two, the body or the page, right, the browser window now has some content in it. Something that is at a level H1 and H2. Okay. Great. All right, let's keep on going. Flip over to your notepad or text editor. This time, you know, there was a reason why somebody created copy and paste. So this is one of the reasons why we have copy paste. So I'm going to copy in my second level, and then I'm going to paste it. Oops. I'm going to paste it. Oh, come on. Accidentally cut that off. That's better. 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have a total of 6 headings there. And so now I'm simply going to change the 2 to a 3, 2 to a 3, and a 2 to a 3. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the next line, the 2 to a 4, and then a 2 to a 4. And this one is going to be 5, that one's going to be 6. This one will be 5, this one will be 6, this one will be 6, this one will be 5. I'm going to save it, flip-flop to my browser, and refresh, and now I have all 6 levels. Again, we use these heading levels for headings, not for paragraphs. We don't use H's for lists, right? We don't use H's for any other piece of information other than for headings. That's the purpose. That's why it's called a heading level. Great. Any questions about headings on page 28 and 29? All right, let's move on. Page 30 and 31. Let's talk about paragraphs. That's right, we're going to be writing a paragraph. So, after heading number 1, give me a couple of lines, and then tab in on the line. Actually, let's level with this. We can do that. Underneath the heading level 1. On page 31, there's some blue text. It's the paragraph. Please write that in. So again, I'm going to write my opening P element, or P tag, and then my closing P tag. And then I'm going to fill in between with the paragraph. This helps so I won't forget to close the P tag at the end. Is a sample. Now, you probably, if you're watching up here, you probably noticed that my text, as I go farther to the side, starts to move my my text editor, so I can't see all my text at the same time. So if you'd like, Notepad has an option that allows you to wrap that content. So under the Format menu, choose Word Wrap, and so now you continue to have that same display without having to scroll left or right. Okay? And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to continue to write. Heading tags can help to make your pages more accessible and usable. It is a good coding practice to use heading tags to outline the structure of your web page content. All right, once you're done with that paragraph, save it, please. Flip-flop to the browser, refresh, and now there's your content. Now, I have a question. When I look at my text editor, it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of a paragraph information, right? But in my browser, I only have 2 lines. Why is that? Oh, that might be okay. You could probably say that. But what is the real reason? Fantastic. We haven't defined what the width of that paragraph should be. So by default, the width of the paragraph is the width of the browser window. Watch. I'm going to maximize the browser window, and now look, I have one big long line, right? So at this point, it's really based on the browser. Until we start to decide, and here I go, changing to smaller, right? I can make it even smaller. Until I decide the size of things, right? Everything is based on the browser window, which is what? Which element is that? So all this content is in which element? So if we start going backwards in the hierarchy, which is the parent element that contains all of that content you see? The body element. So the body element is really, right, the element that's managing all of that content inside. It's saying, okay, you can only go as big as this, which essentially is the browser window. So when the browser gets maximized, so does the body element, right? It simply matches the window. Okay? Great. We haven't defined it, so that's just the way it is. So is this. The color of the text, the size of the text, the background color that you see that's white, the font is all predefined because you have not defined it. It's defined by the browser. Okay? So by default, the browser is going to say, hey, page, what do you want it to look like? The page is going to respond, whatever you want. Whatever you have defined is fine with me since I don't know what I'm doing yet. Okay, so the browser itself has some settings that say, okay, if the definition of how it should look is not defined by the developer, right, by the web page, then go ahead and use some of these defaults. Black, Times New Roman, white background, and whatever the size of that particular element is by default. H1 through H6 has a particular size, right? Paragraph has a particular size, which is usually about similar to like 10 or 12 point font. Okay, if you're using like a word processor. Okay. All right. We'll get into how we can format and style things a little bit later. Okay. Mostly in chapter 4. Okay, let's continue on. Any questions about a paragraph, page 30 and 31? All right, let's rock and roll. Page 30 and 32, or 32 and 33, excuse me. Line break and horizontal rule. All right, in your editor, please go to the end of the first sentence, which is, this is a sample paragraph. And we're going to throw in a break element. Now, you are welcome to put the next text on a new line or not. It doesn't matter. Go ahead and save. Go to your browser, refresh, and now, is it on a new line? Yes. Everything after the break is on a new line, but not in a new paragraph. So the BR tag simply provides a new line, right? It breaks. Well, wait a minute. Why do I have to use the BR element? Can't I just simply press my enter key? Doesn't that work? I mean, it looks like it works in my text editor. Here, let me go. Let me save that. And now let me go to my browser and refresh. Huh. It doesn't work. So the browser only recognizes code, right? It only recognizes code. So you can press enter until next week. It doesn't matter because it's only going to show if you have a new line, if you have a break or some other element. All right, hold on a second here. Let me bring this back here. Get rid of all these lines I don't need anymore, right? But what if I decide, all of these words have one space in between them because I put the space there. But what if I want more than one space? What if I did something like this? How about that? Am I going to show all those spaces now that I put them in there, right? So let me save that. Go to the browser and let me refresh. Nothing. So the browser will only recognize one space. But if you want more than one space, what do you got to do? You got to code it, right? You got to put in a space. And we have a piece of code for that. Okay? We have a piece of code. It's called a special entity character. And we'll code it in, and we get now a space if we want it. Okay? So if we ever want more than one space, we have to do that. So I wanted to show you that it doesn't matter whether you press enter or put more spaces in your code. It won't matter when it's in the content. It'll matter if it's in the code, but not in the content. All right, so let me get rid of all that extra space. Great. I'm going to save that, refresh, and it looks exactly the same. All right, let's move on to the horizontal rule, which I think is on page 33. Okay? All right, let's go to our code, and between the paragraph and H2, we're going to grab a new line or add a new line, and we're going to put in the HR element. And I'm going to tab it in there, by the way, so this way I can easily see where it's at. So I have it lined up with the paragraph, right, where the paragraph element starts. And I want you to save this. And what that has done for us, it separates, right, the paragraph from the next heading with a horizontal rule or line. So that's what the HR element does. Now, this is similar to those phrase elements, bold and strong. Okay? We really don't use this anymore. We use CSS to create these lines. Okay? So, just so you know, this is only there for historical reference. Okay? Great. When we get to chapter 4, those will go away. Okay? Great. Can we move on? All right, fantastic. That was line breaks and horizontal rule on page 32 and 33. Let's move on to page 34 and 35. And let's talk about the block quote element. So think about the block quote element as an element that allows you to accentuate some content. For example, let's say you have a poem or an excerpt from a piece of text or somebody's quote, right? Typically, how is that formatted when it's written? Usually indented from both sides, usually, right? Well, that's what the block quote does, okay? That's exactly its purpose. So let's add a block quote, and we're going to add that after H2. So give me a new line after H2, tab it in, because we like that. We like to tab in. And now on page 35, you're going to see a lot of blue stuff. So ignore that blue stuff, okay? Except for when we get to underneath the body. You're going to see some an H1 that says the power of the web. So please reword the heading number 2 to the power of the web. Oops. Let's get rid of that capital T. Now, after the H2, we're going to put in our block quote. So let's code in the element first, then put in the content between the two pieces. Okay? So let's find the block quote in blue. And now I'm going to give myself a new line. I'm going to give myself 2 new lines. And now I'm going to close the block quote. And so all my content will go in between. All right. The power of the web is in its versatility. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. All right, let's save what we got. Flip-flop to your browser, refresh. And so I want you to notice something. Take a look at the block quote, which is underneath the second level heading, right? Notice that the last word in that sentence is the word is. The next word is on the next line, which is a small word, which is an. And if you look where is ends, go up with your eyes, notice that there is a lot more room there and could fit. But block quote indents from both sides. Okay? So that's why we have block quote. So if you want to quote something, use block quote. Okay? Now, let's go back to our code, and we're going to put in that paragraph that goes above the block quote. So give me a new line above the block quote. And let's put in the paragraph that's on page 35 above the block quote code in blue. So let's put in our P element. We'll close our P tag. Right? And then inside we'll put in that paragraph. Berners Lee. Wide Web. Okay, save what you got. Flip-flop to your browser. Refresh. And now there we have an additional paragraph. All right, so we have a heading, a paragraph, and then a block quote. Any questions about the block quote element? Great. Let's continue on. Page 36 and 37. Phrase elements, right? These are the ones we talked about where we're really just kind of showing you this for, historical purposes. But as we move forward, starting in chapter 4, we will no longer use these. But we need them now so you know what they are and what they look like in case you come across them. There's a nice table on page 36 that has a whole bunch of them, right? And you'll notice that B is in there, strong is in there, EM is in there, and I is in there. So let's practice this. Go to your editor. After H6, give me a couple of lines. We're going to tab in a couple times, right? A few times, actually. And then I want you to type the sentence or paragraph that's on page 37 in the middle, or toward the top, excuse me. It says, call for a free quote. Go ahead and put that in there, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. And what do we got here? 888. Save that, flip-flop, refresh, and you now should have what would be at the bottom of our page, call for a free quote. It's a paragraph with bold or strong phone number. So you can see that 888-555, right, is a little bit more pronounced than the rest of that paragraph or sentence. Any questions? All right, let's add something else. Go to your editor. Scroll up a little bit until you get to the heading number 2 and the block quote where it says access by everyone. I want you to make that emphasized. So make access by everyone emphasized, please. Save it, flip-flop, refresh, and confirm that what you did actually worked. And please check it in multiple browsers. I asked you to open 2. So now open up that file in the other browser if you haven't already done so. So far, so good? All right, let's move on. That was page 36 and 37, phrase elements. Let's move on to page 38 and 39, ordered lists. Right, one of 3 different lists or basic lists that we have. The first one will be an ordered list. Page 39 has some code about in the middle of the page, and we're now going to code that after heading number 3. So please give me a new line after heading number 3, tab it in, and before we add our headings, let's change add our list, let's change our heading. Let's call it my favorite colors. Oops. Now, after the heading, let's go ahead and put in our OL element, right? That's our ordered list. That's what's going to base our list, make it ordered. OL, give me a new line, actually a couple lines, and then close your OL. And everything in between is going to be our LIs. Okay. I'm going to make my editor just a little wider. There we go. And so now let's start putting in our list items. LI, and then I'm going to close my LI. And now I'm going to put in my first ordered item. In this case, I guess blue is on the list, which happens to be one of my favorite colors. Now again, copy paste is going to be really helpful. I'm going to copy that whole line. I'm going to add a new line, and I'm going to paste it in. And then I'm simply going to change the color. In this case, teal, which is definitely not one of my favorite colors. And then I'm going to get a new line, paste again, and simply change the color. It's great if you want to practice, right, typing in all those elements and tags. But once you feel you have the knack for it, use copy paste. It's a lot easier and quicker. But it's up to you. All right, let's save what we got. Let's see if we did it right. That is visually through our browser. There we go. My favorite colors, 1, 2, and 3. Any questions? All right, let's move on. That was ordered list, page 38 and 39. Let's go to unordered list, page 40 and 41. Okay, here I'm going to recommend that we do some copy paste. But before we do that, let's go to our heading level 4. Give me a new line, and then let's change the heading for that level. Let's call it, well, I guess my favorite colors again. So I'm going to copy what we put in 3, and I'm going to paste it in 4. And instead of our ordered list, right, 1, 2, 3, we're going to create this as a bullet list. So please copy all of the code for the ordered list and paste it in the line you created after heading number 4. Now, right, currently as pasted, it's still an ordered list. What do we have to do to change this to a unordered list? Change the letter. You got it. Change the O to a U. Go ahead and do that now, and please test it. Or I should say, display it in your browser. Bingo. While one is an ordered list, the other is simply an unordered list. Series of bullets. This one wasn't too bad, right? Yeah. One letter change. Pretty easy. Okay, let's keep on going. Page 42 and 43, a description list. Yeah, this is that list that has 3 different elements to make up the one, right? Description list. So you're going to, there's a lot of stuff to type here, it looks like. Page 43. We're going to do this under number 5, heading level number 5. So give me a new line under 5, and let's rename that heading, and let's call it sample description list. All right, first we're going to code in the DL for the description list. And so that means put in the opening tag, give me a couple lines, and then put in the closing DL. Okay. The second one we're going to add in is our DT, our description term. So put in your DT opening tag, and then your DT closing tag. And now we're going to fill in the term. And the first term is TCP. TCP. Alrighty. Give me a new line, tab it in, and then tab it in one more, right, from the DT. And here we're going to start our DD element, our description or description definition. However you'd like to, you may see that in depending on who you talk to, what the term is actually called. So DD, and then a closing DD. And now let's put in that content. It's the first DD on page 43. It starts with transmission control protocol is. All right. I'm not going to type in the whole thing, but I've typed in a bit for our first term and definition or description. So this is all we need. All we need is one DT and one DD, and of course our wrapper DL for our description list to work. Okay, let's make sure it's working, and then we'll add another one. So go ahead and save that, flip-flop to your browser, and now if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have our description list TCP, and then we move on from there. Now, if I want to add another term and another description, no problem. Go back to your editor and copy the DD and the DT elements, and then paste them after the DD, right? But within the DL, right, the description list. So if you want more terms and descriptions inside of that description list, make sure it's before the closing DL. So it has to be before this DL. So you'll notice we have one term in description, the second term in description, and then the closing DL. Save that, test it in the browser, and now you'll see you have two of them. Okay. And now that I know that it works, I'll change this to IP, which I think is the next one, yep. And then I'll modify some of the text or the description. Internet protocol is the method, right? So we have internet protocol is the method, whoops, dot, 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 dot. Okay. And so notice how the description is actually indented, right? We didn't tell it to do that. That's just how that's what it does on its own. Okay. So far, so good? Okay, let's move on. Description list, page 42, 43. Let's move on to special entity characters on page 44 and 45. All right. Now, at the bottom of your code, we're going to add some more. After the paragraph, but before the body, closing body tag, give me a new line, tab it in, of course, and I want you to copy what's at the bottom of page 45. It's a small paragraph. It says copyright. Then there's a special entity character called the copyright symbol, and so on and so forth. So go ahead and write in that, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. Once you're done there, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing. We've created this as a paragraph, right? All that content there. Then we added a phrase element. A phrase element is the small, which actually makes the content small. Okay? And then we have our special entity character, the ampersand, the word copy, and then a semicolon. What do you think this does for us? It creates what? It's not a key that's on our keyboard. But what symbol does it create? The copyright symbol, right? Now, this is the name for it. Every special entity character has a number as well. But it's much, much easier to remember this, the word copy, than it is to remember 4 numbers for a particular symbol. Okay? But you'll find as you go forward, whatever's easiest for you to remember, you use. So go ahead and save this, flip-flop to your browser, refresh, and now notice all the way at the bottom of your page, the copyright line is small, right? And there's a copyright symbol, which is what this is right here, that copyright. Okay. So we used a phrase element, small, and we used a special entity character, copy. Right? There's a whole table there on page 44. This is simply a small selection on page 44. There are hundreds of special characters out there. Okay? So if you want a fraction, yeah, there's a symbol for a fraction. Okay? So you don't have to use a number, a forward slash, and another number for a fraction. You can actually get a fraction. It's pretty cool. Okay? So a lot of symbols. All right, any questions? Can we move on? Oh, by the way, it's not even in the list here, is it? The non-breaking space. Oh, it is. It's the 4th one in the list, empty space. So remember when we were talking about spaces, right? That the browser only recognizes one space. So if you want more than one space, you'd like to space something with 2 or 3 spaces apart, well then you use the non-breaking space, right? Special entity character. So the NBSP for non-breaking space. Okay? Great. Let's move on. Page 46 and 47. Yay! Finally, we get to validate to see if the powers that be at the W3C like what we did. Okay? So please, in your browser, give me a new tab. So get a new tab. And I'm going to maximize the window, by the way, so it's easier to see. And I want to go to the w3.org or w3c.org. Either one. Doesn't matter. It goes to the same place. This is the website you're going to become very, very, very familiar with. It's going to help us do a lot of things. One, it's going to provide validation services for us for free. And 2, it's going to provide a plethora of other web-related information for us. Okay? All right, we're going to scroll down. And on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a column. Scroll down until you see a heading that says Validators, More Software. Underneath that, there's a validator called HTML. Please select it. So here's our validator that you'll use all the time. We have 3 options to validate. The first option on the first tab is to validate by URI, a link that you provide the validator where your web page is hosted. You'll be doing this later. We haven't hosted anything yet. Okay? Or you can validate by file upload. That's what we're going to be doing tonight. Your third option is by direct input. What do you think that means? You got it. Type it or copy-paste it right in there, and it will validate the code. For us, since we already have a file, let's go with the valid by file upload option. Choose Browse, and find the file, right, that you created. I don't know where you saved yours, but I saved mine under a folder. There it is, on my desktop someplace. Once you've done that, you don't have to do anything else other than click check the button. Now let it do its thing, right? Notice the little circle going around. Okay. You might get a message. Sure, okay. I'll provide that. Give it a moment. And you get a response. Now, you have two types of responses. Actually, three types of responses. You have a green response, which means that's good. A yellow response, which means warning. And a red response, which means not good, right? There's an error. So the ones that we are okay with, that I am okay with when you submit your work, are green ones and yellow ones. Red ones I should not see, okay? I'll deduct points if I see red ones, right? So in this case, it tells us that here's some information for us. The content looks good using HTML5 or HTML5 parser. Using the scheme, okay, we got green. It's just giving us information about what it used, right, to validate. And here, document checking completed, no errors or warnings. How many of you got warnings or errors? Okay, let me go around and we'll help you figure that out. This particular validator is a new version of the validator, which really provides a little bit more information about the error, which will help you fix some of the problems. So I'll come around and help you. All right, so validating page 46 and 47. This is what you'll be doing in your case study as well as when you do your hands-on practice. Okay? All right, let's move on to page 48 and 49, our structural elements. So I'm going to go back to the code and go back to my notepad. So on page 49, there's a lot of code there, a lot of things happening in that little hands-on practice. So just kind of follow my lead as we're going to, just do one or two things a little bit differently. Okay? We're going to take our structural elements and we're going to wrap it around all the stuff we already have. Okay? We already have. So let's start at the top. So scroll up, scroll your editor all the way to the top. And there are four main parts to our structure. There's a header, a nav, a main, and then there's a footer. And we're going to include all those. Okay? All right, so the first thing I want you to do is let's add in underneath the body. So give me a new line and then tab it in. Let's put in our header element. So just an opening. The opening tag for header. Okay. Then, after H1, I want you to give me a new line and then close the header. Then I want to change, instead of heading level 1 for heading 1, I want to change it to hands-on practice. Okay. After the header, tab it in, and I want you to put a nav element there. Both open and close nav tags. We're going to come back to this, so just leave it as is. Give me a new line, and I want you to code in the opening main tag. Come on. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. We're going to do a little scrolling now. So scroll down almost to the bottom, just before the copyright symbol, right, or copyright line. And give me a new line before it. And then type in a closing main. And then above the copyright line, I want you to type in the opening footer tag. And then after the closing copyright, right, the paragraph, give me the closing footer. So what we've done now is we've created structure to this page. We now have a footer, which the footer content will reside in. We now have the main content, which the main content will reside in. We have a navigation, which we yet have to create, which we will. And then we have the header. Okay? Now, I want you to save this. And now go to your browser and refresh it. Did anything change? No. Because all we've done is created structure to that code. We did not apply any styling or any new elements that affect the content that's already there. We're simply putting the content into logical containers, right? Structural containers. Okay? Great. Page 48, 49 was structural elements. Any questions? Okay. Well, let's move on. Now, on page 50, 51, we're going to do a little addition to our structural elements, and we're going to be adding a div to our code. Okay? We're going to be adding a div to our code. So, let's go to our editor, go all the way down to the bottom. Just before the closing main, just before it, give me a couple lines. And then tab in. So just before the closing main. Tag. We're going to put in a divisional element, a div element. So go ahead and put in an opening div tag, give me a new line, and put in a closing div tag. And now inside this div, we're going to include an address, okay? Which is not necessarily a paragraph, it's simply an address, right? It's got a couple of lines, it's got an address, it's got a person's name perhaps, and so that's what we'll stick inside this divisional area, right? Because the address doesn't really fit as a paragraph, so it doesn't use a paragraph because it's really not a paragraph. So we use this kind of like a wildcard, this div, to put things of this nature inside. So let's go ahead and add it in there. On page 51 in the middle, you'll see the div code, and then go ahead and type in what's inside. There's a strong, and then there's a few lines with breaks. So there's a strong, and there's a closing strong, right? And now I'm going to fill in that strong with the person's names, or the company name, it looks like. Casita, Sedona, bed and breakfast. Ooh, and they're using an cool. They're using a little ampersand, a special entity character, right? To get that little ampersand. And then should be breakfast. All right. And now we're going to give a new line. So after that company name, we'll give it a new line, and we'll start adding the address, which is 612 Tortuga Lane, and then another break, right? So a new line, just like an address line would be on a letter. Oops, not lave, but lane. There we go. Sorry about that. Fat fingers tonight, it looks like. And then we have, it's in Sedona, Arizona, and it's what, 86336. Wow, really typing terrible this evening. And what do we got here? And we got a phone number, 928. I like to use periods in between my phone numbers, not dashes, so I'll make that little change. And of course, we could add another break. It all depends on what's below that content. So I'll put in the break for now, and then I'll see what it looks like, and then I'll come back and take away the break and see what it looks like. Okay, so let's save this. Go to your browser, refresh, scroll down, and there is your divisional area, right? Another space, right? another element that contains some content that doesn't necessarily have a home or a particular element, right? There may not be an address element, perhaps, right? Okay. Now, using div in this way doesn't mean that we can't put elements that have other block level, like a paragraph or a heading. Yes, we can put paragraphs and headings inside divs. We can put anything inside of a div. We can put an audio element. We can put video in there. We can do anything we want. So think of div as a divisional break in the page, but at the same time, think of it as a wildcard where we can use it for anything. Okay? All right, now, this is what it looks like with the break after the phone number. I'm going to remove the break just for kicks, save it, and see what it looks like without the break. Notice. No difference, right? So the div provided us with that break, okay, with that extra line. So putting it or not, in this case, doesn't make a difference, okay? Let's continue on. That was page 5051. And now let's talk a little bit about hyperlinks. Yay! Okay. All right. Let's go up to the top in our code and let's find our nav. Let's find our nav. Now, I'm going to put the closing nav on a new line. And then I'm going to give it an extra line because all my navigation is going to go in between them. And I want each link to be on a new line in my code. Okay? All right, what's one of your favorite websites? Type it in. Just the name of it. So if I want to go to Harper College, I'll put it in there. One of my favorite websites, of course. So put the name of your favorite website in between the nav. Now, we're going to make that text a hyperlink. So, go to the beginning of that text and add in our opening anchor tag. Go to the end of that text and put in your closing anchor. It's not yet a hyperlink. It doesn't really do anything yet because we haven't defined it yet. Now, put your cursor after the A in the opening tag. So it's inside of the tag. And then give me a space after the A. To make this an actual hyperlink, we got to add an attribute, right? Anybody know what that attribute is? What? We have to put a URL in there, but we need a name of the attribute to do that. And we call that href, hyperlink reference, so href. And we know that anytime we use an attribute, what follows is what? Thank you. Whenever we use an attribute, what follows is an equal sign and then two quotes. Fantastic. The value of that, right, hyperlink reference goes in between the quote, right? And that's the URL we need to put in there. Fully qualified, which includes HTTP and all that good stuff. So do you know the URL of the website you put down? I hope so, because supposedly it's your favorite. So type it in there. Include the HTTP : // and then the whole, right, URL. So far, so good? All right, save it, and let's test it. So save it, go back to your page, refresh your page. You might have to scroll up. And now you should have your favorite website name, blue and underlined. Now, click it, and does it take you to that website? just created perhaps your first hyperlink. That's it, right? Okay, we're done. Have a good semester. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Now, what do you see as a problem with our hyperlink? That's okay, but what does it do? It's what it does that it's a problem. Bingo. It does not open a new tab. So why is that bad? Thank you. It takes you away from the page. So now I've created a website that simply takes my clients, perhaps, away from me. So what I want to do is I want to create a link that opens a new tab and keeps my website still behind the scenes, right? For them to go back to if they want to. So first of all, go to your browser and click your back button to take us back to our page, because our clients, right, our prospective people that are going to be perhaps spending money on our website, they're not going to do that. They're gone, right? They're not going to go back to your page. So let's fix that, or at least try to fix that in our code. One of the things we're going to add to our anchor, right, our first opening tag, is something called the target attribute. So let's add that after the double quote, right, of our URL. So we're going to add in target. It is a attribute, so you know what you got to do after you add an attribute. Equal sign with the double quote. Now, one of the ways that we can have this link open a new tab for us is to use the value called underscore blank for a blank page. Underscore blank. This is one of the ways we can do this. Save your file. Go to your browser. Do not forget to refresh so it's got the most current page. Now click on your link and did a new tab open with that website. And we still have our previous page in the previous tab. Awesome. You got that right. Okay. I would like you to create another hyperlink after, on a new line, after your previous one, within the navigation. So create a brand new hyperlink to wherever you want. And I want you to make it open in a new tab. I'll give you a minute or so to do this. All right, let's add one more thing to the anchor. So we have our href, which is mandatory. The target is optional if you want to open up that link in a new browser. Now, when do we really want to do this? When do we want to use the target? When it's a link that does what? Goes away from our website, right? But if we have a link that goes to inside our website, we don't want to use target. We don't want to open up new tabs all over the place, right? We just want them to replace the page. So any link outside of our website, good for target underscore blank. Any link to inside our website, simply no target is necessary. Okay. All right, the third attribute we're going to use, okay, is called title. Now, how many of you been to a page and you're hovering over the links and you happen to hover over it just enough where something pops up? Yeah. A lot, right? They use this a lot. To get that to do that, you need the title element, or attribute, excuse me, the title attribute. And that's what we're doing now. So in the title, put in something that describes the website that that link goes to. So in my case, I'll type in something like Harper College Palatine's Community College. Something like that. Palatine, sorry. Hope I spelled it right. Community college. So type in your own, whatever it is that you want, to describe the link. Save it. Go to your browser. Make sure to refresh. Now, hover over the link for a moment. Don't move your mouse. And now you have the little pop-up. Title. Very nice. You got to like this. Actually, title can be pretty much added to any element for the most part. Okay? But very commonly used in the hyperlink, right? The anchor and image element. We haven't gotten to the image element yet. In a couple weeks we will. Okay. All right, can we move on? That was the anchor on page 52 and 53. And let's turn to email hyperlink on page 58 and 59. So we skipped a couple pages, which does a little practice on hyperlinks. Okay? So we're skipping that because we did a little bit of practice on hyperlinks, and we're going to go straight to our email hyperlink. All right, let's go to our code. Let's go all the way to the bottom. And in the let's do it here. Let's do it in the div that has the information or address for that company. After the phone number, put in a break. And that new line, let's put in an email hyperlink. On page 58, in the middle of 58, you're going to see some code. Please put in that code, the anchor. .net. Great. And we have mail to, and this email address. So the only difference between the hyperlink from before and the hyperlink now is that we're using mail to prefix within the href. And then, of course, a email address as opposed to a URL. Okay? So go ahead and save that. Go to your browser, refresh your browser, scroll to the bottom. You should have a now hyperlink, and if you hover over it, it'll actually probably most likely tell you that it's an email down at the bottom there, which is probably a feature of, it is a feature of the browser. And now click it. And you may receive a message that says, okay, there is no client specified on this machine. So which one of these clients would you like to use, right? Or maybe you already have a client selected, perhaps. I don't know. But it allows us to pick, right, one of these. So this is an option if there is no defined client, email client, you'll get this as a message. If the client is already specified, then an email address will actually open. Okay? So this means that it worked. So we can cancel out of that and continue on. Page 58 and 59. And that is the end of the chapter. Any questions? A lot of stuff, but a lot of good stuff, right? We now started filling in some of the holes in that body element. H1s, our headings, our paragraphs, our lists, block quote, breaks, horizontal lines, phrase elements like strong, EM, special entity characters like copyright, ampersand, anchors, our hyperlinks, email hyperlinks. So we did a lot of stuff tonight. Oh, and really important, our structural elements for HTML5. Header, nav, main, and footer. Really important and really good stuff.